Snow White was never really about Prince Charming. Before Disney, before there was singing, before there were dwarves named Sleepy or Dopey, there was a queen who ate a girl's lungs. There was a child hunted for beauty. There was a story told beside fires in the dark, not for comfort, but for warning. This is the real Snow White. And it is not what Disney made it. It is something older and more important. Hello, my friends. Today, I invite you to set aside the glitter and glamour of modern cinema and step into the older magic, the kind passed down by firelight and memory. This version of Snow White comes from the Brothers Grimm. It is not sanitized, it is not sweet, and it is rooted in fear, beauty, and courage. And while Disney's newest film has sparked frustration across the world, I am not here to argue. I'm here to reclaim the original story, why it mattered, and why it still matters. And I promise you this, when the story ends, I will share the one truth that Disney never tells, the purpose behind this tale, and the deeper legacy that Snow White left behind for us. Little Snow White. Once upon a time, in the middle of a winter, when snowflakes were falling like feathers from the sky, a queen sat sewing beside a window and an ebony black frame. As she stitched, she gazed out at the gentle snow and accidentally pricked her finger. 3 drops of red blood fell upon the snow. The crimson against the pure white looked so beautiful. And the queen sighed, "Oh, if only I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of this window frame," she whispered, her breath fogging the cold glass. Not long after, her wish did come true. The queen gave birth to a baby girl whose skin was as white as snow, cheeks as red as blood, and her hair as black as ebony. They named her Snow White, and shortly after the princess was born, the queen fell ill and died. A year passed like the turning of the page in a storybook. The king, still mourning his beloved queen, married again. His new wife was beautiful beyond compare, with perfect features and elegant poise, but her heart was cold and proud. She possessed a magical mirror, and every morning she would stand before it, admiring her reflection, and ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And the mirror would always answer, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." It would reply in a voice like distant bells. The queen would smile, satisfied, for she knew that the mirror spoke only truth. Little Snow White grew more lovely with each passing season. Her hair fell in waves, black as a raven's wing. Her cheeks blossomed like roses against the snow-white skin, and her kind heart made her beauty shine even brighter. By her 7th year, she had blossomed into a child whose beauty surpassed even the queen's. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the castle windows, the queen stood before her mirror and asked her usual question. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of all?" But this time, the mirror answered differently. "You, my queen, are fair is true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen's face twisted with rage and jealousy, and from that day forward, whenever she looked at Snow White, her heart wreathed with envy like snakes in her chest. Day and night she could think of nothing else, and her hatred grew like poisonous vines in her heart. At last, unable to bear it any longer, she summoned a huntsman to her private chambers, where shadows gathered in the corner despite the bright day outside. "Take this child into the forest," commanded the queen, her voice sharp as winter ice. "I never want to see her again. Kill her, and as proof that you have done what I've ordered, bring me back her lungs and her liver." The huntsman bowed low, his face carefully expressionless, though his heart rebelled against such cruelty. Still, he feared the queen's wrath more than his own conscience, and he led Snow White into the forest, where wildflowers nodded between the ancient trees and birds sang overhead. "What a lovely day for a walk," said Snow White, skipping along the silent huntsman. "Look at these beautiful flowers. They're dancing for us." The huntsman watched the innocent child running ahead, gathering wildflowers with delicate fingers. And when she knelt to pick up a particularly beautiful blossom, he drew his knife. The blade glinted with dappled sunlight, but as he raised it, Snow White turned and saw him. Her eyes widened like a startled doe's. "What are you doing?" she gasped, clutching her flowers to her chest. The huntsman's hand trembled. He couldn't do it. He let the blade drop. "Run, child," he urged, his voice rough with emotion. "The queen wants you dead. Go deep into the forest and never return to the palace." Snow White's face paled further. If it was possible, tears trembled on her lashes. "But why? What have I done wrong?" she asked, her voice small. "Nothing, child. Your beauty has poisoned her heart with jealousy. Now hurry, before I lose my courage to spare you." He glanced nervously over his shoulder. Snow White turned and fled into the forest, branches catching at her dress, tears blurring her vision, and behind her the huntsman killed a young boar, took its lungs and its liver, and presented them to the queen as proof of Snow White's death. The queen, believing she had finally rid herself of her rival, ordered the organs cooked with salt and pepper, and she ate them with savage satisfaction, thinking that they were Snow White's. Meanwhile, poor Snow White ran deeper into the forest. Thorns scratched her arms, roots tried to trip her, and shadows grew longer and darker. Strange noises echoed between the trees, the snap of twigs, the rustle of unseen creatures, the hunting call of the night wolves. Night was falling, bringing with it all the forest's mysteries and dangers. "Help me, please, help me," she sobbed to the silent trees. "I'm lost and alone." And just when her legs would carry her no further, she stumbled upon a small cottage, nestled between the tall pines. Smoke curled from the chimney like beckoning fingers. Snow White approached cautiously and knocked on the door. No answer. She tried the handle. It opened. Creak. Inside, everything was tiny and neat, but strangely dusty. A small table held 7 plates, 7 tiny cups, and 7 little forks and knives, all in perfect order. It was strange. Along the wall stood 7 little beds with patchwork quilts, all arranged in a row. Snow White was so hungry and tired that she took a little food from each plate and a sip from each cup, not wanting to take too much of any one setting. And then, when yawns overtook her, she tried each bed until she found just one right for her size. She lay down, whispered a prayer of thanks, and fell into an exhausted sleep. When darkness fully claimed the forest, the owners of the cottage returned. There were 7 dwarfs who spent their days mining for gold and gems in the mountain. They lit their 7 lanterns and immediately noticed, "Someone has been sitting in my chair," said the first. "Someone has been eating my plate," said the second. "Someone has been tasting my bread," said the third. Someone has been eating my vegetables, said the fourth. Someone has been using my fork, said the fifth. Someone has been drinking from my cup, said the sixth. Someone is sleeping in my bed, exclaimed the seventh. They all gathered around the last bed, holding their lanterns high. The warm light fell on Snow White's face, peaceful in sleep. Her black curls spread across the pillow, her cheeks still flushed from running. Heavens above, whispered the first dwarf. She's beautiful as a spring morning. Shh, you'll wake her, cautioned the fourth. They decided to let her sleep. And when morning arrived with golden fingers of light stretched through the windows, Snow White awoke to find 7 curious faces watching her. She gasped as she sat up quickly, pulling her quilt to her chin. Oh, who are you? She asked, eyes darting between the small men standing around with long beards and kind eyes. We should be asking you that question, little one, said the dwarf with a gentle smile. I am Monday. Each dwarf introduced himself, named for a day of the week. Snow White explained her sad story, the jealous queen, the huntsman's mercy, and her frightened flight through the forest. You poor child, said Wednesday, patting her hand. You've had a terrible time of it. You can stay with us, offered Sunday, if you'll cook and clean and keep house while we mine in the mountains. We leave at dawn and return at dusk, added Tuesday. And you must be careful, warned Friday. Your stepmother will soon discover that you're alive. Let no one into the house while you are away. Snow White promised to be careful and thanked them with tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. She settled into a new life with the 7 dwarfs, keeping her cottage spotless, preparing delicious meals, and greeting them each evening with a warm smile. The dwarfs grew to love her as a daughter or a sister, and their little home rang with happiness. But back at the palace, the queen stood once more before the mirror, admiring her reflection. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? She asked, certain of the answer. You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White beyond the 7 mountains with the 7 dwarves is 1,000 times fairer than you. The queen's scream of rage echoed through the castle halls. She realized the huntsman had deceived her and Snow White still lived. This time she would handle matters herself. Using dark arts learned in secret, she disguised herself as an old peddler woman with stooped shoulders and weathered hands. She packed a basket of beautiful silk laces in vibrant colors and then journeyed beyond the 7 mountains to the dwarf's cottage. It was mid-morning when she knocked on the door, calling out in a quavering voice, "Oh, pretty things for sale, lovely laces for a pretty maid." Snow White peeked through the window and saw only a harmless old woman with a basket of beautiful goods. "Good morning, grandmother," said Snow White, opening the door just a crack. "Your laces look lovely, but I am not to let anyone in." "Oh, surely you can just look, dear child," coaxed the disguised queen. See this blue one? It would match your dress so beautifully. Let me show you how lovely it would look." Snow White couldn't resist. She opened the door wider and allowed the old woman to fasten a brilliant blue lace around her dress. "But child, your dress is so loose. Let me lace it properly so you look your best when your friends return," said the queen. Her gnarled fingers worked swiftly. She pulled the lace so tight that Snow White gasped and fell to the floor, unconscious, unable to breathe. The queen laughed, a sound that shattering glass, and hurried through the forest. Fortunately, the dwarves returned early that day. They found Snow White lying on the floor, her face blew from lack of air. "The laces!" cried Saturday. "Cut them quickly!" They cut the laces. Snow White's breath returned in a great gasp. And when she gets big, she told about the old peddler woman. "That was no peddler, but your wicked stepmother," said Thirsty gravely. "You must never open the door again." Snow White promised once more, her voice still raspy with the ordeal. But back at the palace, the queen again consulted her mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White beyond the 7 mountains, with the 7 dwarfs, is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen howled with rage. Her beautiful face contorted into something monstrous. She retreated to a hidden chamber where shadows gathered even at midday. There, using darker magic still, she created a poisoned comb imbued with powerful venom. Again disguising herself, this time as a different old woman with a hunchback and milky eyes, she journeyed to the dwarf's cottage. When she knocked, Snow White only peeked through the window. "I cannot let you in. The dwarfs have forbidden it," she called. "I am only selling combs, dear child," wheedled the queen. "Look at this pretty one. I'll show it to you through the window." She held up a comb inlaid with mother of pearl and caught the sunlight beautifully. Snow White, who had never owned anything so pretty, opened the window wider. "Your hair is tangled from the wind, dear. Let me show you how well this comb works," said the queen. Before Snow White could protest, the queen reached through the window and thrust the comb into Snow White's black hair. Immediately, the poison took effect. It flowed through her hair, and Snow White dropped into the floor as if struck by lightning. "Now you are done for," hissed the queen. Her disguise, falling away like a mist, hurried through the forest. By chance, again, the dwarves returned home early again, concerned about leaving Snow White alone. They found her lying on the floor as if dead. "Something is in her hair," cried Wednesday, examining her carefully. "This comb! Remove it quickly!" They pulled the comb from her hair, and Snow White revived, coughing and shivering, and she told them about the old woman and the beautiful comb. "That's your stepmother again," said Sunday sadly. "Next time, she'll try something even worse. You must not even speak to anyone who comes." Snow White agreed, trembling at her narrow escape. At the palace, the queen stood before her mirror once more. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White, beyond the 7 mountains with 7 dwarves, is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen's rage knew no bounds. She smashed vases and tore the tapestries, her screams sending servants scurrying in terror. And then, calming herself with terrible purpose, she descended the deepest dungeon of the castle, where not even the bravest guards would go. There, in a chamber filled with arcane implements and ancient texts, she created her most deadly weapon, a poisoned apple. The apple appeared perfect, red and glossy on one side, pale green on the other, but the red half contained poison so potent that a single bite meant certain death. Disguising herself as a farmer's wife with rosy cheeks and kindly smile, she traveled once more to the cottage. Snow White, peering through the window, refused to open the door or even the window. "I cannot let anyone in or even speak with them," she called through the glass. "I understand, dear," said the queen, her voice warm and motherly. I only wanted to offer you some apples from my beautiful orchard. Oh, they're ever so sweet this year." She held up a basket of apples, and the poisoned one sitting temptingly right on the top. "See, I'll take from this green side to show you that they're good," said the queen, biting into the safe half of the apple. Snow White watched as the woman ate the apple with obvious enjoyment. It did look delicious, and the woman seemed perfectly fine. "Well," still desiring to be kind, "I suppose I could take just one apple," she said hesitantly, opening the window just enough to reach out. "Take this special one," urged the disguised queen. "It's the ripest." Snow White accepted the poisoned apple and bit the beautiful red side. The moment the fruit touched her lips, she fell to the floor, apparently lifeless. The queen watched through the windows, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "White as snow, red as blood, black as ebony," she whispered, "and now dead as stone." She hurried back to the palace, cackling with wicked glee. And when the dwarves returned that evening, they found Snow White lying on the floor. But this time, no amount of searching revealed any foreign object that could be removed. She wasn't breathing. Her skin was cold. Yet, she looked merely asleep, her cheeks still rosy, her lips still red. For 3 days they mourned, unable to bear the thought of burying her in the cold, dark ground. She remained as beautiful as she had in life, showing no signs of decay. "We cannot bury such a beauty in the earth," said Monday through tears. So they crafted a coffin of pure glass, so they could always look upon her, and placed it in the hill, surrounded by beautiful wildflowers. Each day, one dwarf would stay behind to watch over her. Years passed, yet Snow White remained unchanged, seeming merely to sleep within her glass coffin as seasons turned around her. One day, a prince from a neighboring kingdom rode through the forest and spotted the unusual sight of a glass coffin gleaming in the sunlight. He approached and gazed upon Snow White, her beauty untouched by time or death. "Who is this maiden?" he asked Friday, who was standing guard that day. The dwarf told him Snow White's sad story. The prince was so moved that he could not bear to leave her. "Please let me take her to my father's palace," he begged. "I will honor her as if she were still alive." After much discussion, the dwarves all agreed. The prince's servants carefully lifted the glass coffin. But one of them stumbled on the tree root. The jolt dislodged the piece of poisoned apple from Snow White's throat. And suddenly, her eyes fluttered open. Where am I?" she asked, sitting up in confusion. The prince was overjoyed and explained everything to Snow White. Captured by her beauty and her gentle nature, he asked her for her hand in marriage. Snow White looked at the 7 dwarfs, who were dancing with happiness at her revival. "Oh, I would be honored to be your wife," she told the prince, "but only if my friends can visit us often." "They will always be welcome in our home," promised the prince. A royal wedding was planned, and invitations were sent throughout the land. Even the wicked queen received one, though no one knew she was Snow White's stepmother. Before the celebration, the queen once more consulted her mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but young queen to be is 1,000 times fairer than you." Consumed with curiosity and jealousy, the queen decided to attend the wedding. And when she arrived at the palace, she was shocked to recognize that it was Snow White, more beautiful than ever and radiantly happy. The queen tried to flee as punishment for her deeds. A pair of iron shoes were heated in coals until they glowed red hot. The queen was forced to step into these burning shoes and dance until she fell down dead. Snow White and her prince lived happily for many years, and the dwarves were frequent and welcome guests at their palace, where laughter echoed through the halls and kindness ruled in every heart. And sometimes, when Snow White gazed out windows, framed in ebony during winter's first snowfall, she would touch her red lips and remember her mother's wish for a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony wood. So, now you've heard it, the real Snow White. A tale not about cute songs or dwarves in the woods, but about jealousy, courage, survival, and slow, painful triumph of innocence. This story was never about a kiss. It was about a girl who was hunted, poisoned, silenced, and yet lived. She endured. The Brothers Grimm's collected stories to preserve culture, not just entertain children. Their tales warned of real dangers, celebrated quiet nobility, and taught that evil wears a beautiful face. But justice still comes. In their time, these stories taught girls and boys alike that true beauty is not just skin deep, it is resilience, purity of heart, and the bravery to stay kind in a cruel world. So, as the world debates what Snow White should be, I invite you to remember what she was and still can be. If the story stirred something in you, if you believe beauty without character is hollow, then like this video. I ask you to subscribe, maybe comment. And what does beauty mean to you? What makes someone truly beauty? But until next time, keep your imagination bright and your heart braver still. This is the Fireside Storyteller, and this was the truth behind Snow White.